Now in Daniel 2, we learned about a prophecy that came to King Nebuchadnezzar in a dream. Now the dream was about a big giant statue with the head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet partly of iron and partly of potter's clay. Now God revealed the interpretation to Daniel, in which Daniel later revealed to King Nebuchadnezzar. He said that King Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom was this head of gold. Now of course, king and kingdom can be used synonymously in the Bible, because you can't have a king without a kingdom, and you can't have a kingdom without a king. So Babylon was this head of gold. Babylon ruled from 605 to 539 BC. Then Daniel says that another kingdom of silver shall arise. Now if you check Daniel 5, it'll tell you exactly who conquered Babylon. And of course, history backs this up. Medo-Persia conquered Babylon. Medo-Persia ruled from 539 to 331 BC. Medo-Persia was the chest and arms of silver. And then Daniel explains that another kingdom of bronze shall come to power. Who conquered Medo-Persia? Daniel 8 and history says that the empire of Greece, led by Alexander the Great, of course, conquered Medo-Persia. Greece ruled from 331 to 168 BC, and Greece was the belly and thighs of bronze. On June 22nd, 168 BC, Greece fell to the Iron Monarchy of Rome at the Battle of Pydna. Rome ruled from 168 BC to 476 AD. Rome was the legs of iron. Now, decades before the birth of Christ, Rome had already conquered all of the Mediterranean world, including Judea. Rome was the political power during that time. Rome was ruling at the time of Jesus Christ's birth and all throughout his life. In fact, Jesus was hung on a Roman cross. Rome continued to rule even after the death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus Christ. In fact, all throughout the New Testament, Rome was the political power. And even after the book of Revelation was written, Rome remained the political power. Meanwhile, after the resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ, the Christian church emerged from the people of Israel. The Christian church started to blossom, and during the Church of Acts, God sent His Holy Spirit to the church, to His people, as promised by Jesus Himself. Acts 2 says that a sound of a mighty wind came rushing and filled the church with the Holy Spirit. The early church was awesome, pure, and faithful. But shortly after, even in the book of Acts, while pagan Rome was still in control, the church was already being set up for apostasy. Now Daniel says that this fourth kingdom, pagan Rome, will be divided. Rome was not conquered from without, but divided from within by 10 barbarian tribes. This is the feat, partly of iron and partly of potter's clay. But what is this mixture of iron and potter's clay? We already know that in prophecy, each metal represented a kingdom, a political power. But what is the potter's clay? In Jeremiah 18, God tells Jeremiah to go to a potter's house, and there he found a potter at work, and the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. Then the Lord said, O Israel, cannot I do with you as this potter? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. God was talking to the church of Israel. He said, O house of Israel. House in the Bible represents a church. In the Old Testament, the house of David was later known as Solomon's temple, which was a place of worship. In Daniel 6, we find Daniel going into his house to kneel and pray. In Joshua 24, Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel, called for the elders, and said, Choose you this day whom you will serve, but for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So house in the Bible represents a church. And in Jeremiah 18, God was talking to the house of Israel. God was talking to Israel as a church. So in Jeremiah 18, God tells Israel that he can form his church like the potter forms the potter's clay. So in this imagery, God describes himself as the potter and his church as potter's clay. Isaiah further describes in chapter 64 and verse 8, where he says that the church is the clay and God is the potter, and that church is the work of God's hands. God formed the church out of potter's clay. In Genesis 2 verse 7, God forms man, his body, out of the dust of the ground. The word that Moses used for dust is the Hebrew word that means clay. And then God breathed into man the breath of life. Now in the Bible, the breath of life is also called the Spirit, because the word spirit in Hebrew is ruach. It means breath. So we have God forming man's body out of clay and breathes in him the Spirit. In Colossians 1 verse 18, Christ was the head and the church was called the body. And remember, God forms his church out of potter's clay. And in Acts 2, at the day of Pentecost, God breathes into the church the Holy Spirit. And so in the beginning we have God forming man's body out of clay, in which he breathes the Spirit in him, and then he became alive. And all throughout the Bible we have God forming the body of the church out of clay, out of potter's clay, in which Christ was the head, and at the day of Pentecost, God breathed into the church the Holy Spirit, and then the church became alive, fully functional to do God's work. What's God's work? What did Adam do? What was his job? He planted seeds, tilled the ground. What's our job as a church? To plant seeds. This is God's work. So what does the potter's clay represent in this prophecy? The church, and not the Old Testament church. It's the Christian church. Because this was formed when Rome was still in power. And then also the day of Pentecost came after the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. This church was the Christian church. The potter's clay was the Christian church. Now Daniel 2 says that the same potter's clay in the Roman era will begin to mix with the iron. Now what is the iron? The iron represents Rome, the political power of Rome. So it's the political power of Rome mixed with the church. And not only that, it's also the pagan beliefs of Rome mixing with the Christian church. How do we know? Well, every kingdom represented by each metal have been pagan kingdoms. Babylon was a pagan kingdom. Medo-Persia, pagan kingdom. Greece, pagan kingdom. Rome, pagan kingdom. Now this Rome is a union of church and state, and not only that, but it's also a union of Christianity and Roman paganism. And Daniel says that this was the ruling power in the feet era of the statue, the Church of Rome. Is this accurate in history? Did the Christian church begin to mix with Roman paganism? This is basic history. Now in AD 306, Constantine became the new Roman emperor by fighting a series of civil wars. And he believed that it was the Christian God that helped him conquer, because as history explains, Constantine received a vision from God. He received a vision from God, and that an angel told him that by the sign of the cross, he will conquer. Constantine became a believer of the Christian God. During Constantine's reign, the Christians went from being a persecuted sect to openly holding positions of influence in the courts and palaces of Rome. And so back in those days, if you wanted to advance in the army or the imperial civil service, holding a position of power, becoming a Christian will take you to the right path. Because all of the people at the top are now Christians. Constantine had made Christianity the religion of the state. And so as people in the Roman Empire converted into Christianity, they brought along with them their former pagan beliefs and practices. And then Christianity became intermingled with paganism. There were pagan statues renamed after biblical characters. The statue of Jupiter was renamed Peter. The statue of Hermes is shown as Christ the Good Shepherd. The statue of the Madonna and Child was retitled as the Virgin Mary and Baby Jesus. Christianity had even adopted the pagan worship of the sun on the day of the sun, or Sunday, instead of the Bible Sabbath. Christianity became intermingled with paganism. Did the church in Rome rule politically and religiously at the time? Let's see. After the division of Rome by 10 tribes, 3 of those tribes, the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths, who were Arian tribes, denied the teachings of the church. So the Bishop of Rome called upon Justinian, who was ruling the Eastern Roman Empire, to uproot these 3 tribes, and Justinian completely annihilated them, and these 3 tribes have no modern descendants whatsoever today. So what else happened during that time period? When Constantine took his empire and moved it from Rome to Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul, he had to leave somebody in charge. And who did he leave in charge? The Bishop of Rome. The Bishop of Rome was now in charge of the Western Roman Empire. But not only did the Bishop of Rome gain the charge over the Western Roman Empire, but in 538 AD, the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian gave the decree acknowledging the Bishop of Rome as the head of all churches. So in that same year, 538 AD, the Roman Church state became the political, civil, as well as ecclesiastical power. Is the Roman Church state still ruling today? Think about it. Does the Pope answer to Obama, or does Obama answer to the Pope? Does the Pope answer to world leaders, or do world leaders answer to the Pope? Think about it. We are now in the era of the feet of the statue from Daniel 2. The Roman Church state, the Church of Rome, is the feet partly of iron and partly of potter's clay. The Church of Rome is a union of church and state, and not only that, but the Church of Rome is a union of Christianity and Roman paganism. How close are we? How near are we? The next thing that comes after the feet is what? The stone.